Over the years, Chris Chan has made many enemies. I'm going to rank them all today. I know I titled this as trolls, but I'm also going to include people who Chris branded as enemies back in the day on the same level with the trolls. I'm going to judge them by how entertaining and funny they were able to be while doing as little harm as possible. One disclaimer before we begin: trolling Chris nowadays is completely outdated and unfunny. It always involves straight up harassment, so if you do it, you're no better than he is. Anyways, let's go. In the F tier we have Bella, also known as Isabella Loretta Jank. Anyone who aspires to be a Chris Chan troll after the golden age is immediately gonna be deducted points. But Bella is easily the worst of them all. As a person, Bella is absolutely disgusting in all the ways possible. Not only does she have some weird fetishes and bad hygiene, but she also likes torturing animals and even has a video of her boiling a hamster. Bella had caught Chris's attention by making an intro for him. From here, Bella would pretend to be Chris's friend while talking crap about him on kiwi farms. Null tried warning Chris about her, but he decided to tell her his big secret about him having sex with his mom. Bella leaked this, but not with good intent. Her ultimate goal was to get Chris to kill himself. Thankfully, Kiwi Farms stepped in and she deleted all of her social media accounts. For her pathetic attempt at notoriety and how much of a sick person she is, she's easily at the bottom of F. Next up we have the Idea Guys, Stephen Boyd and Joshua Wise. These guys are responsible for Chris's insane delusions today, tormenting him and tricking him into believing the dimensional merge and that he's some sort of CPU goddess. They basically got him to do a lot of effed up things, like apparently slapping his mother. Their ultimate plan was to push Chris as far as they could, even if this meant breaking him. The worst part of this is that they even blackmailed and extorted Chris into giving them $6,000 worth of gift cards and other accessories. Because of their absolute malicious intent and real-world harm, they're also an F. Next up is the D tier. They aren't as reprehensible as the F'ers, but they still suck. First off, we have Jacob Sockness. He's a frickin' weirdo. He basically stalks and harasses Chris and has this bizarre idea about how him and Chris need to have sex to save the world or sacrifice a child. Thankfully, he hasn't caused any actual harm other than being super creepy, so D it is. Next, we have Blue Spike. Blue Spike started as two characters, Max and Julie. Julie was the love interest and Max was the evil brother. And boy was he evil. He convinced Chris that Julie was in big trouble and he blackmailed him into doing degrading acts such as shoving a medallion into his anus. It was so bad that he was even condemned by other trolls at the time. Blue Spike is going into the D tier, however. One reason is because we did get the famous Julie tape from Chris, but the main reason is because Blue Spike actually regrets the trolling he did and looks back at it as an act of cruelty. So there's at least that. Next tier is the C tier. These are trolls that aren't really funny or do some cringe things, but are ultimately pretty harmless. First in this tier is Ben Saint. Ben came into Christery in the late 2010s. Not a good start. He basically tried doing what Alec Benson Leary did by creating his own comics with Chris's characters in them. However, not only were his insertions unfunny, but Chris was barely even reacting to him, which kinda defeats the purpose of trolling. He's cringe and unfunny, but didn't do any actual harm, so I'm gonna put him at the bottom of C. Next, we have the Teen Troon Squad. These guys came after the Idea Guys saga and pretty much buddy trolled Chris and enabled his delusion of his weird polyamorous marriage. They're pretty cringe but ultimately harmless, so they also get a C. Next is Catherine and Cousin Al. Catherine is a real-life woman who went on a couple of dates with Chris, and Al plays her cousin. They managed to get some interesting audio footage from the event and documented Chris's behavior, as well as some random papers such as Chris's old homework. How did they get this, you ask? Well, Cousin Al searched through his garbage. Yeah, pretty cringe, I gotta say, but at least we got some info. C tier. Next is Jessica Quinn. Jessica is a fat fetishist who became Chris's online girlfriend for a short while. Her appearance in Christery was brief and she is also quite a weirdo. However, she's also responsible for the Chris Chan Swamp Witch clip, one of my all-time favorite Chris Chan videos, so C tier. Next is Casey. Casey is a real-life girlfriend of Liquid Chris and acted as a new boyfriend to Chris for a short while. The main issue here is that she was often in the shadow of Liquid Chris, who outclassed her every time they appeared together. Her calls also involved her berating Chris instead of riling him up, and Chris being angry is much funnier than him being sad. However, she did often try to give him helpful advice and participated in the entertaining love triangle, so I'll just put her in a high C. The final entry in the C tier is Jack Thaddeus. Back in 2009, Jack hacked into Chris's PSN account and would get Chris into doing humiliating acts, but I found these ones to be more funny. For example, he asked Chris to sing "It's Okay to Be Gay," which Chris absolutely hated because he was quite homophobic at the time. Jack also posted gay ads on the Quickie, which sparked quite a reaction from Chris. However, his phone calls with Chris were pretty unfunny and desperate for reactions. There was one phone call where Jack asked, "Do you know why my parents kicked me out?" and Chris had an unironically amazing comeback with, "Because they couldn't stand you?" Man, if you're felted by 2009 Chris of all people, you're instantly being put in one of the lower tiers. Overall, his antics were pretty funny though, so I think top of C tier is a good choice. Next up we have the B tier. These are the good ones. First off, we have Shigeru Miyamoto. Now, Miyamoto is a real-life person. Specifically, he's the creator of Nintendo's most beloved franchises. The Miyamoto Chris was interacting with was not that person, however. Basically, the troll posing as Miyamoto claimed he wanted to make a new Sonichu video game, so he reached out to Chris to meet up with him. Somehow, this troll knew that Chris would mess this all up and failed to meet up with him, which caused the fake Nintendo representatives to berate Chris over email, saying that Miyamoto was waiting in pouring rain on a park bench for hours. This was early in 2009, and pulling off something like this is pretty funny, so Shigeru Miyamoto will go in B. Next up we have Jimmy Hill. The real-life Jimmy Hill is a football announcer from England, but in Chris Chan lore he's the man who is trying to steal the Sonichu IP and make money off of it. In his version of the comic, Sonichu is a child of Mary Lee Walsh and Jimmy himself, and the villain is a robot version of Chris Chan. Being an early troll, Jimmy managed to easily get under Chris's skin with all these simple actions. He's creative and fun, but ultimately short-lived, which is why I'm gonna place him in B. We also have Billy Mays. No, the real-life infomercial legend didn't actually trick Chris. It was a troll who would get under Chris's skin during the 2009 days. This troll had a charm to him though, spouting off quirky catchphrases while Clyde Cash antagonized Chris over chat. He was present when Chris announced that he owned, and I quote, "numbers of pairs of dirty, crapped briefs." He was also installed as the mayor of Quickville for a while, so I guess we'll put him in B. Next up is another early troll, Blanco Weiss. This was a bunch of people pretending to be a love interest for Chris. The name is really funny since it means white in Spanish and German respectively, two languages Chris claims to be fluent in. The fact he didn't pick up on this is very ironic. Anyways, Blanca would make it their mission to get a Sonichu medallion, something Chris claimed would never happen. Well, it did, but thankfully they destroyed the crap out of it before the dreaded Sonichu medallion curse could hit them. They also got Chris to send pics of him in his mother's underwear too. A little bit degrading, but not nearly cruel enough to put them at the bottom tiers. Blanca gets a solid B. Next up is Vivian G. Vivian actually started out as a white knight who would defend Chris, but grew tired of Chris and turned into someone who's kind of a troll. She would often harshly criticize Chris, but it was often to get him to change his behavior, which unfortunately didn't work. She was best known for making the Sonichu audiobooks, but other than that, there's not really much on her really. I'll put her in the B tier for her good intentions. Adam Stackhouse, the man who ruined Chris's chance with Megan, who cheated in the Parappa the Rapper contest. Actually, he's honestly a very nice guy. Adam Stackhouse is the winner of the Parappa the Rapper contest, who won 2 PSPs and a trip to Seattle. How does this affect Chris? Well, Chris really wanted to win the contest to take Megan with him to Seattle. Unfortunately, Chris's entry was far inferior to Adam's, though. This made Chris very upset and also saved Megan from him. All from winning a contest. So Adam gets the top of the B tier. Time for the really good stuff. This is A tier. First up, we have Clyde Cash. Clyde is the character created after a fake story was created about a boy named Ryan Cash killing himself because there were no new Sonichu comics coming out, so Clyde became a villain and sought revenge. Clyde is considered by many to be Chris's arch nemesis during this period. He's the leader of the miscreants who conspire against Chris to make sure he never gets laid. He was also hellbent on getting Chris to admit he was gay. So much entertaining content came out of Chris's bickering with Clyde. My favorite was when they were doing a push-up contest and Chris filmed himself doing these. In the end, Clyde would completely retire after Chris's father passed away, showing he does have some respect and knows when to stop, landing him in the A tier. Evan Christopher George is the troll responsible for the gay fan art he sent to Chris during the ED page saga to show appreciation. Chris did not take any of this well. What I love about these emails is how cordial Evan acts with Chris. He's barely even trying to annoy him. I also love how Chris asked Evan to draw Rosachu squirting, and Evan did so, drawing her squirting out of her gigantic penis. Evan was also part of the Asperchu 4, which we'll get to. He created a character named Simone La Rosachu, which Chris included in his comics. He also apparently predicted Chris and Barb eventually having sex. Interesting. Next up, we have the man in the pickle suit. And Emily too, since she's also a part of this little arc. Emily was a real-life girl for Chris to wife up, or so he thought. While Chris was walking with Emily after a lunch date, a man wearing a pickle suit came up and charmed her, stealing Chris's date away. Chris hates pickles. Not just their taste, but their phallic shape too. This occurrence damaged Chris so much it would stick with him for a long time, making references to it in future videos.
Trolling stupid pickle-suited.
The man in the pickle suit released a couple of videos too, but never overstayed his welcome. He came in, acted like himself, and rode off into the sunset. Easy A tier. Next we have Alec Benson Leary, the author of Asperchu. Asperchu was a parody of Sonichu, having the protagonist as a gay Sonic Pikachu hybrid who looked a lot like Chris himself. Chris was deeply offended by this and tried to get Asperchu removed for plagiarism, which is very ironic. Leary would also have a series of phone calls with Chris where he would actually try to be cordial, but very critical of his actions and lifestyle, trying to convince him to be a better person. This one didn't work, but it was worth the effort. A tier. At the very top of A tier is the King of Kings, Liquid Chris. Liquid started out as a regular YouTuber who would imitate Chris Chan's and his mannerisms in a humorous way. The troll community would seize this opportunity to say this was the real Chris Chan and that Chris was just an imposter named Ian Brandon Anderson. Liquid Chris played into this perfectly. They set up a SingStar competition where both would sing songs and judges would determine who is better. Liquid won each time, and for good reason. Liquid's real-life girlfriend Casey would also participate, and they built an interesting love triangle dynamic where Liquid would fake his disappearance only to come back and steal Casey from Chris again. Liquid's trolling of Chris on calls was fantastic too, constantly calling him Ian Brandon Anderson, naive, and an imposter, and Chris would rage.
My name is Chris Weston Chandler, and I'll thank you to call me that.
Similar to the Pickle Man, Liquid knew when to retire and left on a good note. Now he's happily married to Casey and is a real-life doctor. Now that was a great Chris Chan troll. But who could be better? Y'all might be thinking I'm committing some sort of heresy by putting Liquid at the top of A instead of S, but the final two entries are probably the most good people in the saga of Chris Chan. I did say at the beginning though I'd also cover his enemies, which some might consider to not be trolls. So here we go. First up in S we have Mary Lee Walsh. Mary Lee Walsh was the Dean of Student Affairs at Piedmont, Virginia Community College and constantly had to deal with Chris's bullshit on several different occasions. And thankfully she would not go easy on him, stopping him from hanging his attraction signs and punishing him when he acted out. Chris absolutely hates Mary Lee Walsh, making her the ultimate villain in his Sonichu series, beating her up on Soul Calibur, calling her a bitch, etc. In his email correspondence with Walsh, Chris tried negotiating with her by saying if she let him distribute his newsletter, he would knock her up his scale of respect by 2 points. But my favorite moment is when she brought him into his office to discipline him. He responded by doing a curse ye ha me ha. For all Miss Walsh did to keep order at PVCC and all the extreme reactions and rage she was able to draw out of Chris, this legend gets an unquestionable S tier. And finally, we have the ultimate good guy in this story, Michael Snyder, the man who ran the game place, an establishment Chris enjoyed going to. Unfortunately, Chris's bad behavior here, whether it was harassing Megan or throwing tantrums when he lost, would get him banned from there by Snyder himself. Chris would try to negotiate with Snyder and even recorded the audio of him doing it, which Snyder absolutely destroyed him in the most calm and reasonable ways too.
Can't we just forgive or forget? Come on, I have this weight on my back.
No.
And I have really missed coming here.
No.
I'm a better person.
Absolutely amazing. This wouldn't be the end of this though, as Chris would actually hit Snyder with his car in 2011, and the Mad Lad actually sued him. This would burn through Chris and Barb's bank account in legal fees, but it was absolutely the justice they deserved, and Snyder delivered it to them. Snyder would be hated for years after this incident, for delivering direct consequences onto Chris's life for his actions, and handling it in such a classy way too, and protecting the kids of the game place. Michael Snyder is at the top of our tier list for Chris Chan's trolls and enemies.